Welcome back, dear travelers. I hope the legends of Perseus, Icarus, and Atalanta have brought you a sense of calm and wonder. Tonight, we continue our journey into the world of Greek mythology with two more captivating tales. Our next story is the Tale of Meleager and the Calydonian Boar, a thrilling adventure where courage is tested and bonds are forged in the face of danger. We will then conclude with the Tragedy of Niobe, a powerful tale of pride and its consequences, reminding us of the delicate balance between mortals and the divine. As we continue, let your body relax even further, releasing all tension. You are safe here, embraced by the warmth of your bed, ready to listen to these timeless myths. But before we begin, now let your imagination take you to an ancient time, a world filled with gods and heroes, where myth and reality blend and the land hums with magic. Picture yourself standing on a windswept shoreline. The waves crash gently, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The sea stretches out, glistening like silver. A soft breeze caresses your face, carrying the scent of the ocean. Behind you, a lush forest rises, filled with towering trees. The leaves rustle like whispers, as though ancient heroes are sharing their secrets. The air is filled with the earthy scent of pine needles and wildflowers. In the distance, a great mountain looms, its peak hidden by mist, a reminder of the gods who watch over this world. The sky darkens, stars twinkling like diamonds. You hear the distant call of a nightingale, blending with the rhythmic sound of the waves. The melody beckons you forward, inviting you into the stories that await. You take a deep breath, feeling the crisp air fill your lungs, letting go of all worries. Now imagine a path before you, a winding trail leading from the shoreline into the forest. The path is lined with moss and wildflowers, their petals glowing in the twilight. You walk along this path, each step taking you deeper into the ancient world. The forest embraces you, branches arching overhead like a cathedral. Moonlight filters through the leaves, creating patterns on the forest floor. The air is cool, and you feel peace wash over you. Ahead, you see a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stands a stone circle, ancient and weathered, covered in intricate carvings. You step into the clearing, feeling the soft grass underfoot, and approach the stones tracing the carvings. The symbols seem to glow faintly, infused with magic. The air is filled with anticipation, as though the world is holding its breath. You close your eyes, letting the energy of this sacred place flow through you. You feel connected to something greater, something timeless. The stories of heroes and gods are alive, woven into the fabric of the world. You hear the gentle murmur of voices, ancient voices telling the tales of Perseus, Icarus, and Atalanta. The voices blend with the sounds of the night, drawing you into the stories, as though time itself is unraveling. The stars above shine brighter, their light illuminating the stone circle. You feel warmth envelop you. The journey is about to begin. You are ready to follow Perseus, to soar with Icarus, and to race beside Atalanta. The night is filled with promise, and the world hums with magic. The journey begins now, as you step into the world of heroes and legends, letting the stories guide you to a place of peace and deep sleep. The Tale of Meleager and the Calydonian Boar. Chapter 1. The Birth of a Hero. Long before the legendary hunt of the Calydonian Boar, Meleager, son of King Oeneus and Queen Althea of Calydon, was born under extraordinary circumstances. His birth was a momentous event, celebrated across the kingdom as a blessing from the gods. The palace was filled with the fragrance of blooming flowers, and the people sang songs of joy, believing that the newborn prince would bring greatness to their land. As Queen Althea held her son in her arms, the three fates appeared in her chambers: Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos, the ancient sisters who controlled the destiny of every mortal. The room grew silent, the air thick with anticipation, as the fates regarded the infant. Clotho, the spinner of life's thread, looked upon the baby with a gentle smile. "He shall grow strong and be a hero," she declared, spinning a golden thread between her fingers. Her words seemed to imbue the air with a warm glow, and Althea felt a surge of pride for her child. Lachesis, the measurer, stepped forward next, her gaze wise and knowing. She nodded in agreement. "His deeds will be remembered by all, and his courage shall be unmatched," she said, extending her hand over the child, as though bestowing upon him the weight of destiny. But it was Atropos, the eldest of the three, who delivered the prophecy that would shape Meleager's fate. She was the cutter of life's thread, her presence as unyielding as death itself. Her eyes fell upon a piece of wood, burning quietly in the hearth, and with a grim expression she said, "Meleager shall live as long as this log remains unburned." A cold shiver ran through Althea. Her heart ached with an unspoken fear, and even as she held her son close, she felt the fragile weight of his life resting in her hands. As soon as the fates departed, Althea rushed to the hearth, her fingers trembling as she pulled the log from the flames. The wood was warm and charred at the edges, its life as finite as that of her child. She wrapped it in fine cloth and hid it away in her chambers, vowing to keep it safe, for she knew that the life of her beloved son depended on it. Meleager grew up within the palace walls of Calydon, his life unfolding under the vigilant care of his mother. Surrounded by wealth and privilege, he was a natural leader from a young age, with a heart both brave and compassionate. King Oeneus, proud of his son, watched as Meleager excelled in combat training, his skill with the spear and bow unmatched. The young prince had a presence that inspired admiration, a strength that commanded respect. He led the youth of Calydon in mock battles, his courage shining as brightly as the armor he wore. But Meleager's strength was not only in his arms, it was in his heart. He was known for his generosity and kindness, traits that endeared him to the people of Calydon. He would often walk among his people, offering a helping hand to those in need, showing that his nobility was as much in his character as it was in his birth. The people of Calydon spoke of him with pride, calling him their protector, the hero who would one day bring glory to their kingdom. Chapter 2. The Wrath of Artemis. Years passed, and Meleager's fame grew. Yet, even as Calydon thrived, trouble brewed in the kingdom. In his haste to honor the gods, King Oeneus made a grave mistake. He offered the first fruits of the harvest to all the Olympian gods, but in his carelessness, he neglected to pay homage to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Known for her quick temper and fierce sense of justice, Artemis was deeply offended by the slight. Her anger simmered as she watched the people of Calydon celebrate without her blessing, and in her fury, Artemis devised a punishment fitting for her pride. She sent forth a monstrous boar, a beast of immense size and strength, with tusks sharp as swords and eyes that burned with a feral rage. It rampaged across Calydon, trampling crops, goring animals, and attacking anyone who dared to come near. The land, once prosperous, was now reduced to chaos and despair. Desperate to save his kingdom, King Oeneus called upon the greatest heroes of Greece to join in a hunt to slay the beast. Messages were sent far and wide, reaching the ears of warriors and demigods alike. Soon, heroes from across the land gathered in Calydon: Theseus, the hero of Athens; Castor and Pollux, the inseparable twins; Jason, the leader of the Argonauts; and Atalanta, the swift-footed huntress from Arcadia. Meleager, now a young man of formidable strength and courage, was determined to lead the hunt and rid his homeland of the terror that Artemis had unleashed. When the heroes arrived, Meleager greeted them with the respect and hospitality of a prince. He was particularly captivated by Atalanta, whose reputation as a skilled huntress preceded her. Unlike many of the other heroes, Meleager saw her as an equal, admiring her independence and skill. Her spirit was fierce and untamed, her beauty matched only by her courage, and Meleager found himself drawn to her in a way he had never felt before. "Welcome to Calydon," Meleager said, bowing slightly as he greeted her. "It is an honor to have you join us. I have heard tales of your skill, and I know that with you by our side, we have a real chance of defeating this beast." Atalanta met his gaze, her eyes steady and clear. "I am here for the hunt, nothing more," she replied, her tone cool and resolute. "The boar is a creature of Artemis, and it must be dealt with." Meleager smiled, sensing the strength of her resolve. "Then let us hunt together and bring peace back to Calydon." Chapter 3. The Hunt Begins. The morning of the hunt dawned bright and clear. The heroes gathered at the edge of the forest where the boar had last been seen, the air thick with anticipation. The forest loomed dark and forbidding before them, its depths shrouded in mist and shadow. Armed with spears, bows, and shields, the men exchanged uneasy glances, each one feeling the weight of the task ahead. Meleager stood at the forefront, his gaze fixed upon the trees, his mind focused and calm. He could sense the fear among the men, but he knew that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the will to act in spite of it. He turned to his companions, his voice steady and clear as he addressed them. "Today we face a great challenge," he said, his words carrying across the clearing. "The boar is a creature of immense power, sent by Artemis herself. But we are not without strength. We are the greatest hunters and warriors in Greece, and together we will bring this beast down." A cheer rose from the crowd, the men's spirits lifted by Meleager's words. Atalanta stood beside him, her bow in hand, her expression calm and determined. She had faced many dangers before, and the thought of facing a creature sent by a goddess did not faze her. She moved with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly, her steps light and sure as she entered the forest, her senses alert to every sound. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the hunters spread out, each one scanning the shadows for any sign of the beast. The forest was dense, the trees towering above them, their branches weaving a canopy that cast long shadows over the hunters. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig seemed to echo with the presence of the monstrous boar. The tension was palpable, each hunter gripping their weapon tightly, ready to strike at the slightest movement. "Stay close, everyone," Meleager called out, his voice low but commanding. "We need to be ready for anything." Atalanta moved beside him, her eyes sharp as she scanned the forest. She sensed the presence of the beast before it appeared, her instincts as a huntress guiding her. "This creature won't be easy to bring down," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Meleager glanced at her, a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "I have no doubt of that. But with you by our side, I feel we have a fighting chance."
Suddenly, a deep, guttural roar echoed through the forest, a sound that sent a shiver down the spines of even the bravest men. The ground trembled as the boar charged through the underbrush, its massive form hurtling towards the hunters. Its tusks, sharp and gleaming, caught the dappled sunlight, and its eyes burned with a wild, unyielding fury. "There it is!" Meleager shouted, raising his spear. "Everyone, get ready!" The hunters readied their weapons, their breaths held as they prepared to face the monstrous creature. At that moment, time seemed to slow, each heartbeat echoing like a drum as the boar came closer, its form growing larger and more menacing with each step. Meleager took a step forward, his stance firm, but before he could strike, Atalanta acted. Moving with a fluid grace, she notched an arrow and let it fly. The arrow struck the boar's flank, wounding it and slowing its charge. The beast let out a furious roar, its gaze shifting to Atalanta, filled with an intense, almost intelligent rage. "Careful! It's coming for you!" Meleager shouted, his heart pounding as he watched the beast turn its attention to Atalanta. Chapter 4. The Battle with the Boar. The boar, though wounded, was far from defeated. It lowered its head, its tusks aimed directly at Atalanta, its massive body poised for a deadly charge. Atalanta stood her ground, her bow drawn, her eyes fixed upon the creature. She was unflinching, her focus unwavering as she released another arrow. This one struck the boar's eye, blinding it in one side. The beast let out a pained bellow, stumbling in its charge, giving Meleager an opening. Seizing the moment, Meleager lunged forward, his spear aimed at the creature's heart. With all his strength, he drove the weapon into the boar's side, the blade sinking deep into its flesh. The beast thrashed wildly, its roars shaking the very earth beneath them. Meleager held his ground, pushing the spear deeper until, with a final shuddering breath, the boar collapsed, its massive body falling still. The forest fell silent, the echoes of battle fading into the distance. The hunters gathered around, their faces a mixture of awe and relief as they looked upon the fallen beast. Its size was staggering, its tusks gleaming even in death, a testament to the power it had wielded. Meleager turned to Atalanta, his face filled with gratitude and respect. "It was your arrows that brought the beast down," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "The kill is yours, Atalanta. You have proven yourself the greatest among us." Atalanta nodded, her expression calm though her heart still raced from the intensity of the battle. "It was a team effort, Meleager. We all played our part." One of the hunters, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward, his tone dismissive. "A woman may have wounded it, but it was Meleager's spear that finished the beast," he said, his voice laced with disdain. Meleager's eyes darkened, his face hardening as he stepped forward. "Atalanta's skill saved many of us today. She deserves every bit of the honor." But not all shared Meleager's sense of justice. Among the hunters were his uncles, who had joined the hunt out of pride and a desire for glory. They looked at Atalanta with scorn, their jealousy evident. "This is an insult," one of them spat. "A woman does not deserve such honor." Meleager's face grew grim, his fists clenching at his sides. "Atalanta has earned this honor," he said, his voice cold. "She is braver than any of you."
If you can't see that, you are blind to true courage. The argument quickly escalated, the wounded pride of Meleager's uncles igniting into rage. Their jealousy, a dark seed buried deep, had been stirred by the victory they believed should have been theirs. Chapter 5. The Tragic End. The clash of words turned to violence as Meleager's uncles, fueled by their envy and indignation, drew their weapons. One of them lunged at Meleager, a dagger flashing in his hand. Meleager, though torn between his loyalty to his family and his own sense of justice, was not one to back down. Fueled by a fierce anger and a resolve to protect Atalanta's honor, he blocked the strike with his spear, the sound of clashing metal echoing through the clearing. "Is this the honor of my family?" Meleager spat, dodging another strike. His voice rang with a mix of bitterness and pain. To begrudge the worth of a hero simply because she is a woman? Atalanta, standing with her bow drawn, tried to intervene. "This madness must end. We fought together as allies. There is no need for bloodshed among us." But her plea was lost to the fury of the men around her. Meleager's uncles, their pride wounded, saw only betrayal in his defense of Atalanta. The insult they felt was too great to overlook, and their pride blinded them to reason. The heated argument spiraled into a brutal fight, metal against metal, until the unthinkable happened. Meleager, his anger and strength surging in the heat of battle, struck his uncle down. The man fell to the ground, his life extinguished in an instant. For a moment the forest was utterly still. The weight of what had happened fell upon Meleager like a heavy stone, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and horror. He had defended Atalanta's honor, but at a terrible cost. The other hunters, frozen by the violence they had just witnessed, looked upon Meleager with a mix of awe and dread. The thrill of their victory over the boar was now overshadowed by this bitter conflict. Atalanta, her heart heavy, looked away, sorrow flooding her as she sensed the darkness that had been unleashed in the hearts of men she had fought alongside. Meleager's uncles, realizing their brother had fallen, recoiled, their faces filled with a newfound fear and hatred. They did not see his defense as honorable. They saw betrayal, and the fury that burned within them was unlike any hatred they had ever felt. They backed away, their faces pale, casting curses upon Meleager, the hunter who was once their pride. Chapter 6. A Mother's Wrath. Word of the violence spread quickly, and the news of her brother's deaths reached Queen Althea. Upon hearing that her son had slain her own kin, Althea's heart shattered. Her grief knew no bounds, and sorrow twisted into a searing rage. She could not fathom that her beloved son, the child she had protected since his first breath, had caused such devastation within her family. Grief-stricken, Althea remembered the prophecy of the Fates, the log that had lain hidden for all these years. Her mind turned to the bundle she had wrapped in fine cloth and hidden away, the log upon which Meleager's life depended. The memory brought her no comfort now, only a deep, aching sense of loss, of betrayal. With trembling hands, she retrieved the log from its hiding place, unwrapping the cloth that had kept it hidden for so long. The wood felt cold in her hands, the life it held as finite as her son's. She looked upon it, her face drawn with grief, her voice a mere whisper. "Why, Meleager?" she cried, her tears streaming down her face. "Why did you bring this curse upon us?" Her sorrow consumed her as she placed the log upon the fire, knowing that she would destroy the son she had once sworn to protect. The flames licked at the wood, catching and spreading until the log glowed with an intense, unnatural heat. Far from the palace, Meleager felt the first wave of pain sear through his body, an unbearable heat spreading through him as though his very soul were ablaze. His strength faded, his knees buckling as he fell to the ground, his life slipping away with each beat of his weakening heart. Atalanta, seeing him collapse, rushed to his side, her voice filled with panic and grief. "Meleager, what is happening to you?" she cried, her eyes wide with fear.
Meleager looked up at her, his face pale and his breath shallow. "The fates, the log, my mother," he whispered, his voice barely escaping his lips. Atalanta's heart broke as she held him close, tears filling her eyes. "No, Meleager, this cannot be. You deserve better than this. This is not the end for a hero like you."
But Meleager managed a faint, weary smile. He reached up, his hand brushing against her cheek in a final, tender gesture. "I did what I thought was right. I have no regrets," he whispered, his voice fading as the last breath left his body. The flames consumed the log entirely, and with it, Meleager's life flickered out. The forest was silent, a weight of sorrow hanging heavy in the air. The hunters stood in solemn respect, their hearts burdened by the realization of what had been lost. They had not only lost a hero, but a man who had fought for what he believed was right, even when it meant defying his own blood. Atalanta held him as he lay still, her grief too deep for words. She had known many warriors, but none had shown the courage and honor that Meleager had displayed. His memory would live on in her heart as the bravest of men, a true hero who had dared to stand for justice. Chapter 7. The Legacy of Meleager. The death of Meleager sent shockwaves through Calydon. The people mourned the prince who had saved them from the wrath of Artemis, only to pay the ultimate price for his loyalty and honor. News of his death reached every corner of the kingdom, and the people grieved, their hearts heavy with the loss of the hero who had protected them. Queen Althea, consumed by her grief and guilt, could not bear the weight of her actions. She was haunted by visions of her son as a baby, the innocent child she had held so tenderly. The image of his lifeless body, a life she had taken, tore her apart. Unable to endure the agony of her betrayal, Althea took her own life, her death marking the tragic end of a family torn apart by pride and vengeance. The people of Calydon, though grief-stricken, honored Meleager's memory with great respect. They built a shrine to him in the palace courtyard, a place where they could come to remember the man who had fought for their safety, who had loved his people, and who had dared to stand against injustice even at the cost of his own life. Songs were sung in his honor, stories told of his bravery, his kindness, and the noble spirit that had guided him. Atalanta, with the weight of sorrow heavy upon her, returned to Arcadia. She carried with her the memory of Meleager, the man who had defended her, who had fought alongside her, and who had shown her the strength of a true hero. She wandered the forests she loved, but the peace she once found there was marred by grief. His loss lingered in her heart, a reminder of the courage and the sacrifices he had made. Chapter 8. A Tale Remembered. The story of Meleager and the Calydonian Boar became legend, told and retold through generations. It became a tale of heroism and tragedy, a reminder of the cost of unchecked pride and anger, and a testament to the bravery of a man who had stood by his principles. The elders of Calydon gathered the youth of the city, teaching them the story of their fallen prince. They spoke of his bravery in facing the monstrous boar, his fierce defense of Atalanta's honor, and the ultimate price he had paid for standing by his convictions. His name became a symbol of the delicate balance between honor and hubris, between courage and recklessness. Meleager's life and death became a source of inspiration, not just for the people of Calydon, but for all who heard his story. His legacy lived on in the songs of bards and the tales of poets, his memory immortalized in the hearts of those who respected the courage he had shown and the sacrifices he had made. Epilogue: a hero's enduring legacy. Though Meleager's story came to a tragic end, the echoes of his courage and sacrifice continued to ripple through time. Atalanta, carrying the memory of her fallen comrade, knew that his legacy was not truly an end, but a beginning. His courage and compassion, his willingness to fight for justice, would serve as a beacon for all who sought to live a life of honor. As Atalanta walked through the forest one evening, she looked up at the stars, her mind drifting to the memory of Meleager. Somewhere in the vastness of the night sky, she imagined him, a warrior who had fought bravely, who had stood by her side when others doubted her worth, who had shown her the power of true friendship. For every ending is but the seed of a new beginning, and the world of heroes is never without another tale to unfold. The story of Meleager was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there is always a choice to stand for what is right. And so the tale of Meleager lived on, inspiring those who heard it to be brave, to stand up for justice, and to remember the value of loyalty and compassion. In his name, new heroes would rise, each one carrying forward his legacy, each one forging their own path through the trials of life. The world would never forget Meleager, son of Calydon, the hero whose life was as bright as a flame and whose memory burned eternally in the hearts of all who honored his name. Chapter 9: A Hero's Eternal Flame. In the years that followed, the shrine dedicated to Meleager in Calydon grew into a place of pilgrimage, drawing visitors from all across Greece. Those who came to honor him brought gifts, wreaths of laurel, and tokens of remembrance, laying them at the foot of his statue. Meleager's story had become a symbol for courage and honor, a tale that inspired warriors, leaders, and common folk alike to live with bravery and integrity. The elders of Calydon kept the flame of his memory alive, sharing the story of Meleager and his deeds with each new generation. Children would gather at dusk around the fire, their eyes wide with wonder, as they listened to the tale of the hero who had fought for his people and defended the honor of a huntress he admired. In the flickering firelight, Meleager's spirit seemed to come alive, his courage and sacrifice lingering like a warm presence among his people. At the shrine, a flame was kept burning in his honor, tended by the young men and women of Calydon who had taken a vow to protect his memory. It was said that as long as the flame burned, Meleager's spirit would continue to watch over the kingdom, guiding its people and blessing them with strength. The flame itself became a symbol of Meleager's unyielding will, his light illuminating even the darkest nights, a beacon for all who sought courage and guidance. One evening, many years after Meleager's passing, a great storm swept over Calydon. The winds howled through the city, rain pounded against the rooftops, and lightning lit up the sky. Fearing that the shrine's flame might be extinguished, the people gathered around it, shielding it from the storm, their hands raised in reverence and devotion. As they huddled together, a feeling of unity and purpose filled the air. They knew that this was more than just a flame. It was a living embodiment of Meleager's spirit, a reminder of his bravery that could not be snuffed out by any force, mortal or divine. When the storm passed and the first light of dawn broke over the hills, the flame still burned, steady and bright, as if Meleager himself were watching over his people. The shrine became a sanctuary, a place where the weary and the wounded could find solace, where prayers were whispered for courage, strength, and protection. Meleager's memory lived on not just as a story, but as an enduring legacy, woven into the fabric of Calydon's heart. Chapter 10. Atalanta's Pilgrimage. Atalanta, though she had returned to Arcadia, found herself drawn back to Calydon year after year. The forests of her homeland, once her refuge and comfort, now seemed haunted by the memories of Meleager and their shared struggle against the Calydonian Boar. His absence lingered in her life, a hollow ache that no victory or hunt could fill. One spring, on the anniversary of the hunt, she journeyed to Calydon. She arrived as the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the land, and found herself standing before Meleager's shrine. She knelt before the flame, her head bowed in reverence, her heart heavy with memories. She felt the warmth of the fire, its heat like an echo of the fierce spirit Meleager had carried within him. Atalanta spoke softly, her words a private confession. "I thought I would feel peace here, Meleager, but all I feel is the weight of your absence." Her voice trembled, a rare vulnerability breaking through her strength. "You were more than a warrior to me. You were a friend, a man who saw my worth without question." As she gazed into the flame, a sense of calm washed over her, as though Meleager's spirit were with her, a quiet reassurance that her path was one of purpose and strength. In that moment, she understood that Meleager's legacy was not one of sorrow, but of inspiration. She rose to her feet, a renewed determination in her heart, knowing that she would carry his memory forward, that his courage would guide her through all the trials yet to come. With a final look at the shrine, Atalanta turned to leave, her steps lighter, her heart fortified by the enduring spirit of her friend. She would carry his legacy with her, a silent vow to honor his life by living with the same strength and integrity he had shown. Chapter 11. The Wisdom of Legends. Years passed, and Meleager's story continued to resonate. In distant lands, his name was spoken with reverence, a legend among legends. Warriors would invoke his name before battle, seeking the strength to face insurmountable odds. Mothers would tell their children of the brave prince who had fought not just with his weapons but with his heart, showing them that true strength was found in kindness and justice. As the world changed and heroes rose and fell, Meleager's story remained, a timeless reminder of what it meant to be noble, to stand firm in one's beliefs, even in the face of adversity. His tale transcended the boundaries of Calydon, becoming a universal symbol of the delicate balance between strength and humility. One day, a group of young warriors traveled to Calydon, seeking the wisdom and strength of Meleager's legacy. They gathered at his shrine, their faces filled with admiration and respect as they listened to the story of his life. They marveled at his courage, at the way he had fought against the monstrous boar, defended Atalanta's honor, and ultimately faced his tragic end with unwavering conviction. One of the young warriors spoke up, his voice filled with awe. "I came here to learn the art of battle, but I have learned so much more. Meleager's strength was not only in his skill, it was in his heart, The elders of Calydon nodded, their eyes gleaming with pride. Meleager's true legacy is not in the beasts he defeated, nor in the battles he won, one elder said. It is in his unwavering commitment to justice, in his compassion for those around him. Remember this as you return to your homes. The mark of a true hero is not only in his victories, but in his heart. The warriors left Calydon with a renewed sense of purpose, their hearts touched by the legacy of Meleager. They carried his story back to their own lands where it would inspire generations to come, each one finding in it a source of strength, courage, and honor. Chapter 12. The Ending. Years had passed since Meleager's death, yet his memory lingered like an unspoken promise in the hearts of the people of Calydon. His name was woven into their songs, his deeds immortalized in the tales shared by every generation. And though the city had faced many challenges, none seemed as lasting as the impression he had left upon their hearts. One winter evening, the people of Calydon gathered around Meleager's shrine to pay tribute to their hero. The sky above was dark, a blanket of stars stretched across it, and the air was thick with reverence as they approached the ever-burning flame. Young and old alike brought offerings, wreaths of olive and laurel, symbols of victory and peace. They left these at the foot of his statue, their heads bowed as they whispered words of thanks and remembrance. The elders, guardians of Calydon's ancient lore, led the ceremony. They shared stories of Meleager's bravery, recounting his fearlessness in battle, his compassion for his people, and his willingness to fight for what he believed in, even if it cost him his life. The flickering light of the shrine cast long shadows as they spoke, making it seem as though Meleager himself stood among them, a silent guardian over the kingdom he had once protected. As the stories came to an end, one of the eldest among them, a man who had fought beside Meleager in his youth, stepped forward. His voice was thick with emotion as he addressed the gathering. Meleager taught us that courage is not merely a matter of strength, but of character. He showed us that the true hero is one who stands for justice, who defends the weak, and who holds loyalty above all else. Tonight, we honor not only the Prince of Calydon, but the hero who lives on in each of us. A murmur of agreement rose from the crowd. As the words echoed in the cold night air, a young boy, barely old enough to understand the depth of the stories, stepped forward. His eyes shone with awe as he looked up at the statue of Meleager, the embodiment of all the bravery he had ever known. "Will you tell me more about him?" the boy asked, looking up at the elder with wide, eager eyes. The elder knelt beside the child, placing a hand on his shoulder. "There is much to tell, my boy," he said with a gentle smile. "Meleager was a man who believed in doing what was right, even when it was difficult. He was a man who valued honor and kindness, who defended those who couldn't defend themselves." The boy looked at the statue, his gaze lingering on the hero he would one day aspire to become. "When I grow up, I want to be like him," he said, his voice filled with determination. The elder nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "Then live with courage, honor, and kindness in all you do, for these are the qualities that made Meleager great. A true hero lives not only in deeds, but in the heart." The night grew colder, but the people remained, gathered around the flame as though it held the warmth of Meleager's spirit. They knew that this was more than just a fire. It was a legacy, a symbol of the resilience and courage he had left behind. Together, they sang songs in his honor, their voices rising to the heavens as though calling, to the hero who had given his life for them. And as the songs filled the night, Atalanta, standing in the shadows of the forest, listened. She had returned to Calydon, drawn by a force she could not resist, an unspoken bond that connected her to the prince who had once stood beside her in the face of death. She watched the gathering from afar, her heart full of memories, each one as vivid as the day they had first met. In the soft glow of the firelight, she felt the presence of Meleager beside her, a silent promise that even in death his spirit remained. She knew now that he would live on, not just in the songs of his people, not just in the stone of his statue, but in the hearts of all who believed in honor, bravery, and kindness. As the people of Calydon dispersed, Atalanta stepped forward, placing a small laurel wreath at the shrine. She bowed her head, her voice a mere whisper. "Thank you, Meleager, for showing me that heroes live on through the lives they touch. Your courage and kindness will guide me always." The shrine's flame flickered, casting a warm glow over the laurel wreath, and for a brief moment it seemed as though Meleager's face smiled down upon her from the statue. Atalanta felt a surge of peace, a quiet assurance that his legacy would endure, carried forward by all who honored his memory. The people of Calydon would continue to tell his story, would remember him not only as their prince, but as their hero. And though Meleager's tale had reached its end, his spirit had found a new life, passed down like a sacred torch, lighting the way for generations yet to come. The flame at the shrine continued to burn, a beacon of courage, a symbol of the heart that had once beat for Calydon. And in the flickering light, the people knew that their hero would never be forgotten. The Tragedy of Niobe. Chapter 1. The Queen's Pride. In the ancient city of Thebes, Queen Niobe stood on the palace balcony, her gaze sweeping across her prosperous kingdom. The golden sun bathed the city in light, illuminating the stone towers and bustling streets below. She was a woman of immense beauty and grace, her presence as majestic as the city she ruled. With dark, flowing hair that glimmered in the sunlight and a regal bearing that inspired awe, Niobe was admired not only for her looks, but for her seemingly blessed life. She was the mother of 14 children, 7 sons and 7 daughters, each one as beautiful and radiant as a young god or goddess. Niobe's children were her pride, her living legacy. She would often watch them from the balcony, seeing her sons practice swordplay in the courtyard, their laughter filling the air, and her daughters moving gracefully through the palace halls, their voices like soft music. She believed her fortune, her family, and her beauty to be the result of her own greatness, a reward for a life lived with virtue and strength. One day, as she sat in her grand throne room surrounded by her children, a messenger arrived. The young man, his tunic dusty from travel, knelt before her, his eyes lowered in respect. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I bring news from the temple. The people are gathering to honor the goddess Leto. They have been commanded by the priests to make offerings to her and her children, Apollo and Artemis." Niobe's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. She raised a delicate eyebrow, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. "Leto," she repeated, her voice carrying a note of scorn. She gestured around her at her children, seated in a semicircle, each one a testament to her vitality and strength. Why should my people honor her above me? She swept her arm toward her sons, tall and strong, their dark eyes gleaming with intelligence and life, and her daughters, their beauty rivaling that of the flowers in the palace gardens. She has but 2 children, while I have 14. What has she done that surpasses my accomplishments? Her eldest daughter, Chloris, a girl with the same proud beauty as her mother, but a gentler spirit, looked at her mother with concern. "Mother," she whispered, casting a wary glance around the room. "It is unwise to speak ill of the gods. They are powerful, and their wrath is not to be taken lightly." Niobe waved her daughter's words away, the motion sharp and dismissive. "Nonsense, Chloris," she replied, her voice firm. "I am the Queen of Thebes, and I will not bow to a goddess who has done less than I have. I shall speak to the people myself and remind them where their true loyalty lies."
Rising from her throne, Niobe's robes swept the ground with a silken whisper, flowing around her in waves of royal purple and gold. Her children followed her, some casting anxious glances at each other, their faces a mixture of pride and apprehension. They had always known their mother to be strong, unyielding, and confident. But they also knew the gods were not to be trifled with, their powers both vast and unforgiving.
As Niobe walked through the streets of Thebes, the people fell to their knees, bowing in reverence as she passed. Their eyes followed her, filled with admiration and wonder, for they saw her not just as their queen, but as a symbol of their city's prosperity. Yet beneath their admiration lingered a quiet unease, a sense that their queen's pride was growing unchecked, casting a shadow over her beauty and grace. Her children walked behind her, each one embodying the physical grace and strength that Niobe held so dear. They were her crowning achievement, the living proof, she believed, that she was favored by the gods. Niobe's pride swelled as she saw her people gaze upon her children with awe, as though the divinity in them radiated from her. As they approached the temple, the people whispered among themselves, their voices low but urgent. They marveled at the beauty of the queen's family, the strength of her sons, and the grace of her daughters. But an air of unease lingered, as though the pride that shone in Niobe's eyes had cast a shadow over the city. Many could not shake the feeling that something terrible was looming, a storm on the horizon they could neither see nor escape. Chapter 2. The Warning. The temple courtyard was filled with the people of Thebes, their heads bowed in reverence as they prepared to make offerings to the goddess Leto. Priests stood before the altar, their heads shaven, and robes simple, chanting prayers in low voices. The air was thick with the scent of incense, the smoke curling upward like tendrils reaching for the heavens. Flickering candles cast a soft, warm light over the marble pillars, and the people knelt, their faces solemn, as they joined the priests in their devotion. Niobe's approach was like the entrance of a storm. She strode into the courtyard, her gaze fierce, her bearing regal and unbending. The people parted before her, their murmurs dying as they turned to watch. Ascending the temple steps, Niobe's voice rang out, clear and commanding, echoing across the courtyard. "People of Thebes, why do you honor Leto above me?" she demanded, her voice filled with a pride that bordered on contempt. "Look at my children, each one healthy, strong and beautiful, a testament to my power and favor. Leto has but 2, Apollo and Artemis, while I have 14. Why should we kneel before her when I have proven my worth 1,000 times over?" The priests exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale and drawn. One of them, an elderly man with a voice that trembled with age, stepped forward, bowing low before the Queen. "Your Majesty," he began cautiously, "we honor the gods because they are divine, for they hold power over all things. It is not for us, mere mortals, to question the will of the divine."
Niobe scoffed, a cold smile playing on her lips. "Divine or not, I am their equal. My children are my proof of my greatness. If Leto takes offense, let her come and see for herself if she dares."
Her voice echoed through the courtyard, her words bold and unrestrained. A shiver ran through the crowd as they watched their queen, standing tall and defiant, her pride shining as brightly as the sun. Chloris, standing beside her mother, felt a chill settle in her bones. She looked around at her brothers and sisters, her heart pounding with a growing dread. She leaned closer to her siblings, her voice barely a whisper. "We must leave this place," she said, her words urgent. "The gods will not suffer such words. We must convince Mother to return to the palace, away from the temple." But Niobe remained defiant, her eyes flashing with unshakable pride. She believed herself untouchable, that her wealth, beauty, and children were shields against any misfortune. Her children glanced at each other, their expressions troubled, but they followed her lead, unwilling to break the loyalty they felt toward their mother. The priests resumed their prayers, their voices quieter, their words trembling. They knew the gods were listening, and they feared what might come. The people of Thebes felt the weight of Niobe's words, and many left the temple with heavy hearts, their minds filled with worry. A tense silence settled over the city as whispers of the queen's defiance spread like wildfire, and an ominous sense of foreboding hung thick in the air. Chapter 3. The Wrath of Apollo and Artemis. High upon Mount Olympus, Leto sat in a garden of eternal beauty, surrounded by flowers that never wilted and streams that ran crystal clear. She was a goddess of great power, and her face darkened with anger as the words of Niobe reached her ears. Her gentle features hardened, her eyes narrowing with a mother's fury. She turned to her children, Apollo and Artemis, who stood beside her, their faces reflecting the gravity of their mother's distress. "Will you allow this mortal to insult me?" she asked, her voice filled with a quiet, deadly anger. "She mocks me, boasting of her children as though they make her my superior." Apollo, god of the sun, music, and prophecy, nodded, his face grim. "Mother, she shall learn the price of her arrogance. I will see to it that her pride is brought low." Beside him, Artemis, goddess of the hunt and the moon, drew her bow, her face set in a fierce expression. Her eyes, usually as calm as a moonlit forest, now blazed with the cold light of justice. "She will regret her words," she said, her voice filled with righteous anger. "Let us go to Thebes and remind her of the power of the gods." The two gods descended from Olympus, their approach like a gathering storm over the city of Thebes. Their presence alone cast a shadow over the land, the air growing thick and heavy as though holding its breath. Moving silently through the streets, they came upon Niobe's palace, where the laughter of her sons echoed through the courtyard, oblivious to the danger descending upon them.
Apollo, his face stern, lifted his bow, notching an arrow as he took aim at Niobe's sons. His gaze was unyielding, cold as the winter sun. The young men, practicing with their spears, were filled with life, their shouts and laughter filling the courtyard. But in a single moment, that laughter was silenced forever. One by one, Apollo's arrows flew, each one finding its mark with a terrible precision.
The once lively courtyard was transformed into a scene of horror as Niobe's sons fell to the ground, their bodies struck down with a merciless swiftness. Each arrow was as unerring as the will of the god who wielded it, cutting through the air with deadly intent. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the cries of servants and guards who had rushed into the courtyard upon hearing the commotion. They knelt beside the fallen princes, their faces pale with shock and disbelief. The courtyard, which had moments ago been filled with the energy and laughter of youth, now lay in stillness, stained with blood. Inside the palace, Niobe felt a strange chill run through her. She couldn't place the reason, but a wave of dread settled over her heart. She rose from her throne, her regal composure faltering as she hurried to the courtyard, her robe trailing behind her. But nothing could have prepared her for the sight that awaited her. "No!" Niobe screamed, her voice raw and breaking, echoing against the stone walls. Her eyes took in the bodies of her sons, strewn across the courtyard like fallen leaves. "Who has done this? Who would dare harm my children?" A cold voice answered her question. Apollo stepped forward from the shadows, his golden hair catching the light, his gaze filled with a divine, unyielding wrath. "I am Apollo, son of Leto," he said, his tone void of mercy. "Your arrogance, Niobe, has brought this upon your family. You dared to mock my mother, and now you will pay the price." Niobe's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, her heart splintering as she looked upon the lifeless faces of her beloved sons. "Please," she choked, her voice thick with grief, her spirit breaking under the weight of her sorrow. "They were innocent. Spare my daughters, I beg you." But before she could finish her plea, Artemis, silent and composed, stepped forward. Her bow was already drawn, her gaze fixed upon Niobe's daughters, who stood trembling in the courtyard, their faces pale, their hands clutching each other in fear. Artemis's voice was cold and resolute. "No, Niobe," she replied, her words carrying the chill of a winter night. "You boasted of your children, placing yourself above my mother. Now you shall witness the true power of the gods." With deadly calm, Artemis released her arrows, each one finding its mark with the same deadly precision that her brothers had. Niobe's daughters fell one by one, their beauty and grace no match for the wrath of the gods. Their cries pierced the air, each one echoing through the palace and beyond, a lament that would haunt the city of Thebes for generations. Chloris, the last of Niobe's daughters, looked to her mother with tear-filled eyes. Her voice was weak, a whisper laced with sorrow and despair. "Mother, why did you provoke them?" she asked, her words fading as the final arrow struck her, ending her life in an instant. Her fragile form crumpled to the ground, joining her siblings in the tragic silence of death. Chapter 4. The Fall of Niobe. Niobe stood alone amidst the bodies of her children, her once proud spirit now crushed beneath an unbearable weight. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch the faces of her sons and daughters, her fingers brushing against their cold skin. The reality of her loss settled over her like a shroud, suffocating and all-consuming. She had believed her children to be a shield against any misfortune, a testament to her favor with the gods. But now they lay lifeless before her, proof of her hubris and the unforgiving wrath of the divine. The people of Thebes gathered silently around the palace gates, their faces filled with grief and horror as they looked upon their queen's suffering. They had loved Niobe for her strength, her beauty, her unwavering pride, but now they saw the consequences of her arrogance. The gods had shown no mercy, and Niobe's pride had led to the destruction of everything she held dear. Niobe's knees gave way, and she collapsed to the ground, her regal bearing lost in her despair. Her face was streaked with tears, her voice a broken whisper as she called out to the heavens, her words barely audible. "Leto! Apollo, Artemis, I was wrong. I see that now. I have lost everything because of my pride." She clutched her chest, the agony of her loss tearing through her with an intensity that left her breathless. The palace courtyard, once filled with laughter and life, was now a place of silence and death, a tomb for her beloved children. She wept, her cries echoing through the empty halls, each sob a testament to her shattered heart. Chloris had been spared, but the sight of her siblings lying lifeless around her broke her spirit. She knelt beside her mother, her own tears falling freely, her hand resting gently on Niobe's shoulder. "Mother," she whispered, her voice thick with sorrow, "we must seek forgiveness. We must make amends with the gods." But Niobe could hardly hear her daughter's words. Her grief was all-consuming, the pain too intense, her pride too deeply wounded. She had lost everything she held dear, and there was nothing left for her now but the hollow emptiness of loss. She looked up to the heavens, her gaze filled with a desperate plea, but there was no answer, only the unyielding silence of the divine. Chapter 5. The Transformation. From their vantage on Mount Olympus, the gods watched Niobe's suffering. Leto, seeing the queen's agony, felt her anger soften. Though Niobe's words had been full of pride and disrespect, Leto was a mother too. She understood the pain of loss, the deep love that a parent holds for their children. She turned to her own children, Apollo and Artemis, her gaze gentle but firm. "She has suffered enough," Leto said quietly, her voice filled with a compassion that only a mother could understand. "Let her find peace, in whatever form she may." Apollo and Artemis exchanged glances, their expressions softening as they considered their mother's words. With a shared nod, they reached out, their divine powers combining to grant Niobe a final mercy. In the courtyard of her palace, Niobe felt her body grow cold. Her grief, once an unending storm within her, began to settle into a quiet numbness. Her limbs felt heavy, her skin growing pale and hard, her heart slowing as if it too were turning to stone. She felt herself growing still, her once vibrant body becoming rigid, her face frozen in an expression of eternal sorrow. Slowly, Niobe's form transformed, her skin hardening to marble, her tears turning to stone as they trailed down her face. She became a statue, her grief preserved in cold, unyielding rock. The people of Thebes watched in awe and sadness as their queen was transformed, her once proud living beauty now a monument to eternal sorrow. Chloris approached the statue of her mother, her own face wet with tears. She reached out, placing a hand on the cold stone, her voice barely a whisper. "Mother, I will remember you. I will remember all of you." Her words were a promise, a vow to keep her family's memory alive, even as the gods turned her mother into a symbol of pride and loss. The people of Thebes gathered around the statue, their heads bowed in respect. They knew that Niobe's transformation was not only the end of her story, but a warning, a reminder of the price of arrogance. The gods had made their judgment clear, and Niobe would forever stand as a testament to the dangers of pride, her sorrow etched into the stone, her tears flowing endlessly as a stream, a reminder of the fragility of human pride. Chapter 6. The Legacy of Niobe. Generations passed and Niobe's story became legend, a tale passed down from parent to child, from elder to youth. Her statue remained in the courtyard, a silent guardian over Thebes, her stone tears flowing as a river of sorrow that could not be contained. Travelers came from far and wide to see the weeping statue, to hear the tale of the queen who had dared to challenge a goddess and had paid the ultimate price. Chloris, the only surviving child of Niobe, dedicated her life to honoring her mother and siblings. She became a priestess, serving in the temple of Leto, her devotion a quiet offering of atonement for her family's transgressions. She told the story of her mother's pride and her siblings' beauty, hoping that others might learn from Niobe's tragic fate. Chloris's life became a beacon of humility and reverence, her actions a living reminder of the importance of respect for the divine. In time, the people of Thebes came to see the story of Niobe not only as a tale of divine wrath, but as a lesson in humility and self-awareness. They built a shrine near her statue, a place of reflection where they could honor the memory of their queen and her family. The shrine became a sacred space dedicated to the virtues of humility, devotion, and respect for the gods. The elders of Thebes gathered the children of the city, bringing them to the statue to teach them the tale of Niobe's rise and fall. They spoke of the power of the gods, the importance of humility, and the dangers of pride. Niobe's statue, with its eternal tears, became a place of pilgrimage, a somber reminder of the delicate balance between human ambition and the divine. Chloris, in her old age, would sit beside her mother's statue in the palace courtyard, her wrinkled hands resting on the cold, unyielding marble. Time had softened her once youthful face, but her spirit remained steadfast, and her dedication to her mother's memory had only grown. The young children of Thebes often gathered around her, their eyes wide with wonder, as she told them the story of her family, her voice gentle, yet filled with the weight of sorrow and lessons learned. "Your grandmother was a woman of great beauty and strength," she would begin, her gaze drifting to the statue of Niobe, frozen in her moment of eternal grief. But she was also a woman of pride, a pride that, like an overflowing river, swept away all that she cherished. Let this statue be a reminder to you all, no mortal, however great, can stand as an equal to the gods. The children would listen intently, some stealing glances at the weeping statue, their young minds grappling with the tale of love, loss, and the tragic cost of hubris. For Chloris, these gatherings were not merely retellings, but a way of weaving her family's story into the fabric of Theban life, ensuring that her siblings and her mother would not be forgotten. As Chloris grew older, the people of Thebes came to respect her deeply. She was seen as the last link to a legacy both tragic and powerful, a living symbol of humility and reverence for the gods. Her devotion to Leto, Apollo, and Artemis was unwavering, her days filled with quiet prayers and offerings in the temple. The people began to seek her counsel, hoping that her wisdom and humility might guide them through their own lives. One day, as the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden light over the city, Chloris returned to the statue, feeling the weight of her years upon her shoulders. She knelt at her mother's feet, her head bowed, her hands clasped in prayer. "Great Leto, Apollo, Artemis, she murmured, her voice trembling with age and devotion. "I ask not for forgiveness but for peace, for my mother's soul and for our people, who honor you with humility." A gentle breeze stirred the air, and Chloris thought she could feel a warmth radiating from the statue, as though her mother's spirit, transformed and softened, was there beside her, watching over the city. Tears filled her eyes, and for a brief moment she felt a sense of peace, as though her family's tragedy had, at last, been understood and honored. Chapter 7. The Garden of Niobe. As the years turned into decades and the story of Niobe and her children became woven into Theban culture, the people of Thebes built a beautiful garden around the statue. They planted flowers that bloomed vibrantly in the spring, filling the courtyard with colors that softened the solemnity of the stone. Vines and flowering trees encircled the statue, creating a peaceful sanctuary where people could come to reflect, offer prayers, and find solace. The sound of Niobe's stone tears, like a softly flowing stream, became a constant presence in the garden. People believed that these endless tears were a sign of her eternal sorrow, a message to all who came to honor her memory. The garden became known as the Garden of Niobe, a place where the grief of a mother and the mercy of the gods coexisted, a reminder of the delicate balance between human pride and divine power. Travelers from distant lands came to Thebes, drawn by the legend and the beauty of the garden. They would walk through the flowering paths, listen to the gentle sound of the water, and stand before the weeping statue, their hearts heavy with the tale they had heard. The Garden of Niobe became a place of pilgrimage, a destination for those seeking wisdom, solace, or a reminder of their own humility. In time, the story of Niobe spread beyond Thebes, told by bards and poets who traveled the ancient world, sharing the tale of the queen who had dared to challenge a goddess and had suffered the consequences. A story became a part of the lore of Greece, a cautionary tale that echoed through the ages, a reminder to every listener of the fragility of human pride and the strength of divine will. Chapter 8. The Enduring Legacy. Long after Chloris had passed away, her life a testament to devotion and humility, the Garden of Niobe continued to flourish, tended by generations of Thebans who remembered the lessons of their ancestors. The garden, with its soft colors and gentle murmuring stream, remained a sanctuary, a place where people could seek peace and wisdom in the presence of the statue. Even as Thebes grew and changed, as new kings and queens rose to power, the statue of Niobe stood steadfast, her face frozen in an expression of sorrow and regret. Her tears continued to flow, a silent testament to the price of hubris and the love of a mother who, despite her pride, had cherished her children with all her heart. And so, the tale of Niobe lived on, passed down from one generation to the next. Children grew up hearing the story of the queen whose pride had led to tragedy, of the gods who had shown both wrath and mercy, and of the daughter, Chloris, who had devoted her life to honoring the family she had lost. In this way, the tragedy of Niobe became more than a story of punishment. It became a tale of remembrance, love, and the enduring power of humility. In the end, Niobe's legacy was not one of mere pride or punishment. Her story became part of the soul of Thebes, a reminder that even the proudest among us can find peace in humility, that even the deepest sorrow can become a source of wisdom. Her tears, flowing endlessly through the stone, became part of the land, a quiet river of grief that fed the flowers of her garden, a lasting symbol of both human frailty and divine mercy. And thus the people of Thebes, and those who travelled from far and wide, would come to the Garden of Niobe, laying flowers at the foot of her statue, their hearts full of respect for the queen who had once defied the gods and who now stood as a guardian over the city, her sorrow an eternal reminder of the delicate balance between mortals and the divine. The end.